Welcome to VPG's Virtual Water Cooler Chat Podcast, a platform that features professionals across a variety of industries and aims to foster diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, DEIA, for all, with a central pillar of championing the achievements of women. Our conversations explore a wide spectrum of backgrounds, experiences, and perspectives, creating a vibrant mosaic that enriches our collective understanding and strengthens our commitment to diversity and empowerment. Today, we're speaking with Andrew C.M. Cooper, an internationally recognized executive leader and apologist for compassionate business practices, and author to The Ethical Imperative, Leading with Conscience to Shape the Future of Business. Cooper made history as the first Millennial and Black executive to serve as general counsel of UPS Airlines, the world's largest logistics airline, with over 20,000 employees operating in 220 countries. His team was essential to the success of Operation Warp Speed, the United States pandemic vaccine relief effort. Cooper helps organizations regain and retain high performance through leadership transformation. To learn more, visit andrew-cooper.com. Let's get started.
Good morning, Andrew C.M. Cooper. I'm going to call you Andy.
Please do.
That's like much easier than Andrew C.M. Cooper. But I didn't want to give you the official name there. Thank you so much for accepting to be a guest on Virtual Water Cooler Chat. So why did you accept?
Well, because you reached out and you were so friendly, and I always look for opportunities to make new friends. And can I say congratulations on this being your third season? It's not easy to have that level of consistency to continue chopping at the tree. And so kudos to you for the endurance.
I really do appreciate that, because when I first started, it was just like something to do. And I actually use it to practice my speaking, because I'm very camera shy. When I told my friend I'm an introvert, they were like, get out of here. I said, well, okay, fine. I will settle of being an ambivert, but definitely not an extrovert.
We have a similarity in that. I recently started a newsletter called Letters to the Leader Within. And a lot of it is because I have to continue to practice my writing just to improve. I spend a lot of time redlining contracts, right? And using legalese. But sometimes, you want to get outside of that and to write other things. And it's good to have that constant practice.
And then also being able to be a conversationalist, because legalese, like you said, people do not generally understand legalese, except for sometimes lawyers don't even understand legalese.
It's so true. It's so true.
So, okay, let's get to why we're here today. Yeah. Tell us, who is Andy Cooper? And who's Andy Cooper? Didn't know that you're going to be asked that question, huh?
Yeah. I thought about it when you sent over that question. And, I think I'm a lot of things. I think all of us are a lot of things. So I could say he's an economist, a lawyer, a writer. I could say that he's a father, a husband, a friend. But to encapsulate all of that, I think I'm really just an explorer of the human condition. In some ways, I think we are all explorers of the human condition with various degrees of curiosity, right? And at various stages of life. But I have this itch that I have to scratch. And for 20 years, I've been engaged in the concept of ethnographic research or ethnography. I was exposed to it by my professor at George Washington University. Her name was Donna Minich. And Dr. Minich taught me about a qualitative form of research. It's a method of studying cultural practices by immersing yourself in them. And so the itch that I've been scratching is to know not only myself, but others, and to understand what motivates them. And that has translated so well into all of the other aspects of my life. If that's being a leader, if it's being a husband, if it's being a father, just understanding what ties us all together as human beings has been my preeminent occupation for the last several decades.
That we actually share similar background in the sense that I am also GW alumni. I went there.
I didn't know that.
I went there to study paralegal certificate. It's like an evening program. Yeah. I was in construction litigation when I first started got into paralegal profession by accident because I needed a temp job. I left my research job. I have a master from University of Kansas
Yeah.
for political science, East Asian languages and cultures, and I study international communication, and I love studying negotiation. So it's really been amazing. The first job did not work out, and then I needed a temp job. At the time, I was living with my parents, newly master graduate, moved to the East Coast, and I was like, oh, yeah, I get some time. And so I signed up for an agency, and then they sent me to the wrong job, actually.
Oh
Yeah,
my
because they
gosh.
needed a candidate to fill this position that is, I'm way qualified. I was like, I'm just going to go there for 2 weeks. But 2 weeks turned into like a couple of years, actually, because they liked me so much and they wanted me to apply for the job. And I'm like, no, I'm not interested. And then eventually, the office manager loved me so much and said that, would you like to give me your resume? Because they work on international construction projects as well. So there's a rainmaker there. I'm going to have lunch with later today. So after this, I'm going to go have lunch with him.
That's nice.
And he came into the room and he was like, Nancy told me about you. And I said, okay. Because when I gave Nancy my resume, she was like, you didn't tell us that you have a master's degree. I said, well, it's not relevant for the job. And Mike was like, I call him. I was like, oh, hi, Mr. Lulakis. And he goes like, just call me Mike. He's really been a mentor to me. I mean, he had many associates that he has to mentor anyway, but I think that we just have a good chemistry and he give it to me straight.
We have very similar, I think, connection again, not just with GW, but with Kansas. So I didn't know this,
Yes,
but
I
when you
know.
mentioned, but when I was working out in law firm about 15 years ago, I
Short Hardy and
started,
Bacon.
Chicardi and Bacon in Kansas City, Missouri, on the Missouri side. But we had lots of our partners from Kansas.
Well, do you know someone by the name David Fittler?
No, the name doesn't ring a
Well,
bell.
he was way before that.
Oh, okay, okay.
He was way before that, and he was so there's so many connections. It's so funny when you connect the dots, and then
Hmm.
because when I saw Short Party and Bacon, I was like, who do I know that was at Short Party and Bacon?
Yeah.
So it was Professor Fittler, and I knew him because of my late law professor. I didn't go to
Mm,
law school. My professor had been trying to get me to go to law school for the longest time, but I
mm.
told him I'm very principled. I do not want to be a lawyer. I rather do like graduate research. I think
Yeah,
that's the side that I really want to do, empirical research. But what do
yeah.
you know? I ended up working for lawyers most of my life.
Well, I mean, GW does a great job of encouraging and steering students to the sciences and to research and to being just interested in meta questions, large questions about society. So, when I started at the law firm, it occurred to me that that law firms are just, and it's not just law firms, it could be companies, any organizations, really just a small community. They're micro communities. They have norms and behaviors that are unique to that particular organization and that group of people. And so ethnography and my interest in it really served me well when I moved from the East Coast and went out to the Midwest. And I had never been out of the Midwest before. I had no family there. I was in a culture that I didn't understand because there is a very specific, as you know, there's a different culture in Kansas and Missouri.
Oh yeah.
And so like this interest in I guess the inner scientist in me to want to understand and to know what is the right way to be effective in that organization really began my journey in studying leadership and studying organizational leadership. And then as I got more senior in my practice, I began leaning into having the dual role of being a seeker of knowledge as well as a guide, because being captivated by that dual responsibility of learning and leading really animates my commitment to ethical leadership, to reflection, to tangible action, and like all of these things that we're talking about, the places we've been, the people that we've interacted with, they matter to not only who we are but to the culture that we take into organizations.
Well, one of the things that I found so fascinating is that, especially through the virtual water cooler chat, the community is small, especially in IP. Oh my God,
Yes.
it's really small.
Yes.
And the thing is, when people were talking about connecting the dots, because you can only connect the dot from the past, but
That's right.
sometimes we're so busy in our day to day, putting out fires and everything, we forgot all the dots from before. So now,
Yes.
while I'm talking, I say, oh, show Hardy and Bacon. I remember Professor Fittler. So Professor Fittler came to teach international law sort of symposium for the
Mhm.
political science department. He was an adjunct. So he had he thought he was cute, I think, at that time. And he had the 10 commandments when we started. He was like, thou shalt not ask the professor for a ride from his Mercedes-Benz. I was like, okay, cute. And so he had us introduce ourselves at the beginning because nobody really knew him, he thought. And I took that class because of my late professor, Stoltenberg, who told me, oh, one of my students is going to teach this symposium. I think you should take it. I understand you don't want to go to law school, but you should take it. This is in political science. I was like, okay, well, I'll take it. So he had us introduced. I don't think anybody else know me. And I was like, I actually kind of know you and your reputation. And he was like, how do you know? I said, we have a mutual friend of Professor Clyde Stoltenberg. And he goes like, oh, tell Clyde I said hi. I think that's like the professional reputation that
Yeah.
we will talk about that later.
Yeah. And no, that you're absolutely right. It's that's huge. And honestly, in the Midwest, because it's so small and so many people, know each other, the people who rise in law firms pretty much are all on a first name basis. I mean, and when you think about IP, it's an even smaller community. Reputation becomes so important, right? So part of the organizational research I've been engaged in is distilling the different cultural expectations that comes out of the groups of people. For example, some cultures are really big on oral storytelling, right? And organizations that develop around areas where people are big on oral storytelling, their organizations also incorporate that as well into how it brings individuals into the organization. So they may engage in rituals that talk about how accomplishments of an individual. I remember when I started at UPS, for example, we would make a big deal out of people who reach 5, 10, 15, 20 years of experience and so on. And part of that was so that new people that come into the organization, they can understand their place, like in the continuum of success of the organization. If you've worked in the Midwest, you know that a big part out there is being nice. So when I was a young associate, I could get what I perceived as a nice email, but it was actually one that was in their culture fairly strongly worded. It was Midwestern nice, right? People can talk to you and you walk away from the conversation like, oh, this is a positive experience. But, on further reflection, you realize, oh, maybe that wasn't positive feedback, right? So young associates in my book, I think the latter half of it or the latter quarter of it really are professional advice to individuals who are navigating different cultures about the ethical expectations that they should have, that they should be unchanging. They're kind of non-negotiable, but how you incorporate that into your practice in the context of a larger culture.
So something just came to my mind when you talk about nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been thinking, and you're like, what are you thinking about now? So let's talk about nice versus kind.
Mm.
I've recently come to reflect on, I have a huge super people pleasing tendency. So
Mm.
that's being, well, in the past, I say a lot more no now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was growth. That is growth. And part of it is like when you say yes to people, so that is being nice. But is it really being nice, or is it like one, are you just not able to confront an issue? And is it
Yeah.
how much is it people pleasing and is it about you versus being kind that sometimes it's offering critical feedback to people who need to have that second opinion, but you may risk upsetting someone because they
Mm-hmm.
don't want
Mm-hmm.
to hear it or they
That's
may
right.
not be in a position to receive it.
That's right.
So I think nice is sort of like more about yourself and trying to sort of soothe that inner, I don't even have the right word. So to basically make yourself feel better. And then it's like, oh, I am nice, quote unquote. And then whereas I'm being kind, like my mentors, they have told me things that I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
but they're being kind to me upon reflection. So I wonder what your thoughts is on that.
I mean, it's a great question. I think it depends on the culture that you hail from. There are some cultures that conflate niceness and kindness because the outward expression of being on the same page with other people that you live with is seen as a high form. There's a high value placed on that. But in, I think, a lot of Western American cultures, kindness and being nice are two different things. Being nice is kind of the social expectation that we overlay across interactions, right? I can have pleasant words exchanged with someone that I don't like, and that's being nice because that's socially expected of me. Being kind, in my view, is more of your default personality. It comes from your internal motivation to do what you believe is in the best interest of yourself or for others. So when you're being kind, sometimes you can give someone very candid feedback, and it be strongly worded. It could be feedback that they don't want to hear, but it's what they need. It's the medicine that they need in order for them to do well and be better. And a person who is truly kind and who truly cares about that person will not tell them otherwise, because they know that person needs to hear what they have to say, and it has to be unvarnished. But again, it really depends on where you are and how people perceive kindness versus being nice. And then there's always the kind of the line, the filter in between being kind and nice, which is the method in which you transmit the information, right? Some people see that as being the most important dividing line. So you can be kind and say something that really needs to be said, but you can do it in a nice way. It's almost like it's the transmission route of delivering information that people really latch on to. But I think if you're being kind and you're doing it in a way that fits the cultural expectation, no one can really blame you.
Yeah, I mean, and thank you for raising the point about culture, because that information, I mean, I'm Chinese American, so Asian cultures really emphasize on harmony, social harmony.
Yes.
So a lot of time we really cannot say no, at least traditionally. I think the people that are raised in America is a little bit more different.
Yeah.
And they might have an inherent conflict between like the traditional culture that raised us and also the culture that we have to basically perform, and not being able to speak outwardly and be vocal about our achievement, because we traditionally view that as bragging, versus it's just basically letting people know your service.
Yeah. No, it's so true. That's actually what I was thinking of as I was describing it. I grew up, or I spent between 9 and 13. Lived in Japan, in Okinawa, Japan, and I agree. There are some cultures that really, really believe that the kind thing to do is to align yourself with the cultural expectation of doing or saying what's right, even if you feel otherwise. And I can see the merits of that. And I can also see the merits of the more Eurocentric, almost rooted in the Germanic experience of Western culture in the United States, where the kind thing to do is to tell someone that they're being a jerk.
Maybe not like, well, I guess it should be do that face, because at least you'll be authentic.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, there's some truth to both, I think.
Yes. You grew up in Walterboro, South Carolina, population of 5,000.
That's right.
You can tell that I did my homework. So from small town, and I think you also talked about growing up in trailer neighborhood, and I have actually chatted with Jeremiah Chen. We talked about racism. And I have chatted with Amanda Dokudo, also went to GW, and I want to talk a little bit about this. When we think about underrepresented, we really cannot fathom how underrepresented, what does it mean to be underrepresented? So Amanda explained how when she wasn't even thinking about going to school, but eventually the family, because she has so much potential, and Mike thinks the same thing, because people see the potential in them. And then I think for Amanda, they raised money, and she was going to go on a great storyteller. I mean, you guys are social media company. Everybody knows how to tell stories at Meta, it seems. And so Amanda was talking about like how she was getting ready to go on the bus, and someone was calling her. It's like, don't go yet. And she was going to like pay the tuition and send this like $2,500 check or something. I think her mother was saying, you just received a letter from the GW. And then she goes like, open it, open it. It turns out to be a full scholarship.
Wow.
And yeah, I know. When I was listening to it, I mean, I knew like when sometimes people were struggling with tuition, GW is a private school, people who are basically trying to make ends meet, you have to change your neighborhood to get out of your current sort of socioeconomic system. So I thought that it's really amazing how you were talking about some of the things, like how when you are in the underrepresented community, there's such slim chance that you could actually get out there. So that's why like ADAPT, NCPP, and so many different organizations, the pathway programs, everything that is really working on getting the underrepresented community to kind of like have a peek of the outside world so that they can actually, have a chance to get out.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think it's a main vein in my book. In fact, I start in chapter 1, I talk about forgotten towns, and in chapter 2, I talk about forgotten people. The book is separated into 3 parts. There's the first part talks about sociological issues and the need for a corporate response. Part 2 talks about the qualities of leaders in organizations in order to respond to those issues. In part 3 are really professional development moves that matter for leaders to be more effective. But the first part deals exactly with what you're describing, the underrepresented talent in communities that we don't tap into as a society and as organizations, as communities of people, that we are missing out on, that could make major differences in not only the products that we develop, but in the markets that we enter, and the efficiency of the revenue that we generate, and the profit that we retain as organizations that are helpful in strategic decision making. These people are the difference maker, those who are often underrepresented and not seen. And the problem that we experience is that there's a sort of groupthink problem that develops when organizations and leaders tap people that are carbon copies of themselves to be in organizations. And I don't talk, I'm not like Jeremiah. I'm not an expert in DEI. I don't talk about DEI very often, but I do talk about how inequality prevents organizations from tapping into those forgotten people and forgotten towns, and the need for organizations to address that problem by investing in those people and in those places. So when I was general counsel of UPS Airlines, I lived in Louisville, Kentucky, and of course the ethnographer in me wanted to understand that community a little better. And so I got involved in the Metro College program, which is a program our organization ran that paid full tuition for students that went to University of Louisville, and also worked part-time for the company. And getting to know those students and learning about their families and stories, I unlocked some knowledge about underrepresented communities, even in the Midwest and Appalachia. Because I'll tell you, there are some communities, there are some people who are poorer and need more help and resources in the hills of Kentucky and the mountains of Appalachia, as just as much as kids in South Georgia here in Georgia, or where I'm from in coastal South Carolina. So forgotten towns and forgotten people exist everywhere. The picture of who we should be tapping into, and the picture of the resource that can be connected with, if we we address the issues of inequality changes based on geography. I'm a big advocate for organizations really leaning into their local communities, creating company towns, creating opportunities to elevate folks who otherwise wouldn't have access to them. I personally do that through 3 organizations. Really now it's starting to become 4 as I work more with Braxton Davis at NCPP. The first is Page Turners, Make Great Learners. They're an organization that Mike Binns actually is on the board of. I was previously on the board. I'm on the advisory board now, but I was on the board of directors. Fifi Handy and that organization really focus on getting students to build their home libraries, because what we have found from research is that it's not just the ability to read, it's access to the words, the velocity of reading that students have early on that makes a difference. Kids in well-resourced neighborhoods consume more words than kids in under-resourced communities, and that makes a difference. The second is the Lincoln Foundation. My dear friend Marshall Bradley is out there, another education-based organization. They offer enrichment programs, support for youth through those programs in the summer and so on. And then the third is the Harvard Debate Diversity Project, which is now the Veritas School by dear friend Brandon Fleming. And so just shout out to those 3 organizations, as well as in CPP, as I work more with that organization to get folks who are not represented in the patent profession into our profession.
That is so amazing, because the interview that I had with Mike Binns was like some time ago now. And then the other day I got a message on LinkedIn from someone that was part of the program and had an engineering background and decided to apply to be a patent examiner and wanted to pursue law school. And thank you. And also thank both Mike Binns and I about the virtual water cooler chat. I was like, whoa.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I mean, just when you have a hard day and then it's like, why am I doing all of this? And it's just that one message that just kind of make all the difference.
Yeah.
So
doesn't it feel good? Doesn't it feel good to see that full circle?
It does feel good. And I think it does also, because I was in litigation for 20 some years, in patents about 20. And yes, I started when I was 3.
Clearly.
So in 2020, I decided to start my own company, Virtual Patent Gateway. And I heard that you were talking about like IP and everything. So I almost exclusively work on patent litigation, patent infringement, and mostly district court, ITC, PTAB. But PTAB is the one that I really sort of fell in love with, the one that I'm most passionate about. I do not enjoy ITC work myself, just because it's too fast, too much discovery, too much fighting in short time. And I felt that for myself, I always give people kudos when they can actually handle ITC. I just prefer not to. And so PTAB is sort of my niche. So January is VPG's 5th year anniversary. When I first started and you were talking about like protection, the IP protections, there's the 4 different types of IP. I've kind of studied all of them. One of my other professor from the GW program, he was like talking to me right before I graduated from the program. He said, any chance that you would want to get into patent litigation? I said, I don't know anything about patent. He was like, do you know anything about construction? I'm like, no. You seem to do well. I'm like, I guess both of them, they have enough technical specification, critical path management schedule, blah, blah, blah. And I asked my professor, if you have to look in my background and basically on how I did at school, he was an adjunct professor at the time. He used to work at a large law firm downtown DC. So he said that, I think you definitely need to get into patent litigation, because I don't see you doing trademark. I don't see you doing copyright and trade secrets. They're sort of like a little rare. You're not going to make any money out of it because it's just not as prevalent. That's his perspective. And it turns out that he packed me pretty right. Because there's so much similarity between construction litigation and, patent litigation. And the fact that I keep learning like new technology, not at the attorney level, but when we're putting together exhibits, every once in a while, you're looking at the claim trust and you're like, oh, okay, this is what it is. And then you're putting together exhibits and I think, claim construction. So the word Virtual Patent Gateway, so it was supposed to be Virtual Patent Paralegal Alliance. And I did my due diligence because I left in December 2019. I was going to take like 3 months break before I start. So I just need a break because my dad passed in 2017.
Oh,
And then
sorry to hear that.
my mom lives with me and she doesn't drive. She's like very traditional Asian woman. She doesn't want people to know about her. And she also does not want me to sort of promote my business because one, if I am too busy, I won't have time to spend with her. And I think that's like our protecting me.
Mm.
I'm like, how am I going to be able to grow my business if I don't tell people that I have a business? He was like, people know that you have a business. Why? How? I'm like, isn't that supposed to be a good thing? So there was some inherent conflict early on, that cultural conflict, because I did start the business trying to get a little bit more equilibrium between work and life,
Mm-hmm,
you know?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you would understand in litigation when people was like, oh, you got to go to Japan for 3 weeks
Oh yeah,
and you got 3 days notice.
I understand entirely. In fact,
Yes.
I started off as like Jeremiah as a patent litigator at Shokardi, and then transitioned over to managing patent litigation at UPS, and then my career took a turn as I began expanding my transactional practice. So when I became the chief IP counsel at UPS, then I took on prosecution, tech transactions, acquisitions, all that stuff, M&A support, and so my skill set started to broaden. And I realized, oh, I like this a lot more. I like doing transactional work more. I like the deal side of things. You get more involved, and you realize I'm actually pretty good at it. And once you, like you said, you found that passion. And once you find that passion, you're like, no, I don't like ITC. No, I like this. You realize, hey, I'm going to lean into that. And when we start living and working in our passion, and you get into that power zone, that's when your career really takes off. That's when you really start making gains personally and professionally. So I applaud you. And I would also, as a coach, I have mentees and I coach them. Look, you try different things, for maybe the first 10 years of your profession. Once you realize, you've had enough visibility in the different areas of law or different areas, you then start to specialize. You go deeper and deeper into that thing which you are really good at. And like you, I'm still learning. I also am a business owner, have a small micro market and vending business that I manage, and we're two different locations, co-located, but office environment as well as a warehouse. And just learning that as a business owner, first couple of years has just been, hey, this is what it is. Sometimes you're going to have to get your hands dirty, roll up your sleeves. Sometimes you're going to have to do things you don't like. Sometimes you're going to have to promote yourself, even if you don't want to, even if it feels like it's pulling against your natural inclination, or even the advice of family, even if it feels countercultural. Sometimes we have to do what we have to do in order to level up, to be better. So I totally empathize with you on that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think part of it is that at some point, I just have to recognize the fact that it is my life. And while I love my mom, I'm taking her to London and Greece. And she always claimed that she does not speak English. She's going to, And I'm like, what language did you speak for the last 30 years? Besides Chinese. It was so funny. I've been so busy. Like, I'm leaving for California on Tuesday. I'm actually going to see Jeremiah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Tell him I said hi.
I'm going to visit Matter, your headquarters.
I was there. It's a wonderful building, wonderful campus. I like the New York office, I think, a little better, but our main campus is also great.
Well, like Jeremiah was like, do you want to go to Sunnyvale or do you want to go to Menlo Park? I was like, which one's easier for you? She was like, well, Menlo Park has a lot more stuff. I go to Sunnyvale, but there's nothing. So you should go to the Menlo Park. Well, okay, I'll go to Menlo Park. So that's really one of the things that I have actually opened up so many connections, and people are so kind. Mm-hmm. And just really open arm. And then I, in turn, also do the same thing with my mentees. So let's get back to your book. You talk about 4 moral imperatives in your book. Yeah. I think it's 4, right?
That's right.
You talk about the speak, the very first moral imperative.
Yeah. The four moral imperatives are speed, inspiration, community investment, and open systems, building open systems. The speed element really requires that we take just a half step back and talk about the difference between the word conscience and conscientious. So I talk about leading with conscience. Conscience is the moral judgment and ethical decision making that we make. It is a word that is based, it comes from the Latin root conscientia, which means knowledge within oneself or having a sense of right or moral sense. Conscientious is about our work ethic, our organization, our reliability. Any person who is a psychologist to understand the DSM-5, they'll tell you that it's one of the big 5 personality traits that tells you how a person comports themselves in daily work. But it also comes from that same Latin root. And so the two are linked in a way, because conscience is the why. It's the why we would do a thing, the moral judgment. And then conscientiousness is the how we do a thing. It's the way in which we organize ourselves. And both of those things, we have to look at speed as a moral principle from both perspectives. It's the why would I decide to move quickly and the how I do it. So when I talk about the moral imperative of speed in the book, the why is firstly about people, centering on people, that ethical imperative. When we look at organizations that move quickly, what they tend to do are they engage in new markets before competition. They capture market share. In doing so, they save jobs. They are able to save a downstream business. Perhaps it's a B2B organization where you have other businesses that are dependent on you. And I'll use a very contemporary example. If you look at Meta Platforms, our own company, and how we have developed, we were quick to adopt AI and incorporate it into all of our products and services. That AI is driving great value to the businesses that rely on our business. And so when we think about speed, we think about those two prisms. The first is just understanding why it's important. And it's important from a value saving proposition. It's good for business in that direction. But then there's also the how prism. And the way that we move with speed in organizations today is to declutter our decision making and to decentralize decision making. It's to give frontline managers and people who are closest to the work and closest to the people and closest to the problems, you give them the ability to make meaningful decisions that impact meaningful parts of the business. And that is a very scary thing, right? Because we, over the last 50 years or so, we've had a view of businesses that really looks like a pyramid. At the top, the most important, impactful decisions are made by the smallest group of people. And that wasn't always the case. If you look at the silent generation, the greatest generation, and businesses that were created around that time, what you find are when someone had the title manager, that title really meant that they were managing. They were controlling P&Ls. They were making hiring and firing decisions. They were deciding on SKUs that would be presented in retail locations. They had real power. And in some ways, the book advocates getting back to a balance where you can have contributors who are making meaningful decisions to the life of the business. And actually, what you're seeing now trickle through most industries are what feels like a thinning out of ranks, but really it's the right sizing of personnel to projects. And now there needs to be the decentralization of power back down, or the descending of power back down to those people so that they can be agile organizations.
So many things to unpack there. I always think that, because I was a case manager, so it seems like that we're managing people, but then later on, I started following authors like Simon Sinek, Adam Grant, organization psychologist. I love those too.
Yeah,
and then,
me too.
yeah, and then, but Simon will always say, Simon said, You don't manage people. They are not like towels that you could just do this to, right? So you manage the process and lead the people.
That's right.
And I'm so glad that we are like agreeing. I can't wait until I meet you in person for 2 book signing sessions. And thank you so much for also saying yes to that.
Of course. Yes,
I was like, who is this lady? I love writing. I love books. So I'm actually writing another illustrated book with one of my illustrators. So it has been really interesting because, like you can appreciate how time is finite. Like you don't get back your time. So when you're trying to write an impactful book like this, right? It's like you are juggling between you are sacrificing some of your personal time.
Oh, yes.
Like family is like, oh, why are you not doing, this? I mean, basically, that's such a juggle so that you could leave your own legacy, I think.
Yes.
I think those of us who write is that there are something intrinsic that is fulfilling for us to write and share. So one of the things that I think you and I had talked about is taking the high road. I'm a non-attorney practitioner, surviving in the very hierarchical attorney, non-attorney system.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's a certain level of disrespect. How you take it is how you take it. Eventually, you learn not to take it personal.
Yes.
But there's lessons to be learned. And you and I kind of talk a little bit about taking the high road. Sometimes it's like, I really don't want to do it. But eventually, I think with the conscience that you were talking about, leading with conscience, it's like, but that's not what I signed up for. And so embrace the suck and just keep doing.
Let me just also mention before we leave the topic of the book.
Yes.
I also want to say that I've been really well. You mentioned this. It's we write because we want to leave a legacy. We write because we have something to say. We write because we want others to find something valuable in them that they can latch onto. And I have been so pleased. I've been so pleased with the reception that the ethical imperative has received. It's almost as if the market was waiting for a book like this to be written. It's not Adam Grant numbers, but the performance has been very well. We were multi-week #1 bestseller on Amazon. The book received the 2024 Financial Times Book of the Year nomination. It actually won the 2024 New Book of the Year for HR Magazine, and it has been adopted for teaching at NYU School of Business, the Stern School of Business. So, thank you for acknowledging the importance that what it matters for writers. And, I'm so lucky to be in a situation where book sales, and everyone will tell you, if you write books, you don't make a lot of money from the sales. Book sales are not the point, but to both have book sales and also recognition for the market has been great. Taking the high road. So, my book is filled with some examples of companies that I think have done a great job taking the high road. And again, when I say companies, I mean organizations of people. So Bombas, for example, has done a great job of selecting and bringing into their organization people who care about the issue of homelessness. And the organization has done great things for providing shelters with socks for people. I was on a podcast and this guy, he's like, oh, Bombas is just a sock company, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, they're just a sock company. But the principle is, if you have more companies that are equally concerned with an issue, if every one of the Fortune 500 companies chose an issue to address, the impact that it would have on society would be massive. So just imagine a company taking an issue like water. And I actually have an example of that, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola really focused on water reclamation in India, where there was a problem with clean water and the depletion of water from Coca-Cola's operations. And so they committed to being a water neutral company. And then they pushed it even further, saying, hey, we want to return more water than the amount we are taking. And they have been successful on both scores. Apple how Apple's managed its tech layoffs. Even Starbucks, the way Starbucks has been culturally competent in the way that it has entered the Chinese market. All of these are examples of organizations, but really of the people behind those organizations that have placed the ethical imperative, the focus on people before profit, and have really been successful at doing it. Taking the high road in leadership, it's about prioritizing things like integrity over expediency, even when it's challenging, right? One example that has resonated with me is Dan Price. So Dan Price over at Gravity Payments, he chose to raise his employees' minimum wage to $70,000 a year. And that decision wasn't driven by like any short-term financial gains or anything. It was a response to him centering people and seeing that, one of his employees had a fast food manual on their desk when he was walking in the office, and he asked questions about it, and he learned that this person had a part-time job because they weren't able to make ends meet. And since he made that decision, he took the high road in that case. What ended up happening was remarkable. The company's profits have gone through the roof. They've seen revenue growth. They've seen client retention. They've seen employee retention. Their churn went through the floor. Their employees were able to accomplish goals, pay down more debt. 70% of the employees' debt was able to be paid down. I mean, just so many positive things happened as a result of the organization taking the high road. Now, let's just shift gears quickly to individuals. And I do this in the book, right? As you read the book, you'll realize there's a constant shift between here's the organization, now here's what you do as an individual, as a leader. In our own profession, in our own practices as leaders, taking the high road can be very difficult, right? When you're dealing with difficult individuals. Sometimes it means that you have to hold your peace and hold your tongue. So sometimes it means having a difficult conversation. But in all of those contexts, the same principle holds true, that when you are placing the individual's outcome, when you center people in the decision that you make, it makes taking the high road easier, right? So my advice in coaching has always been, think about the circumstance you're in. Think about the partner that you're dealing with. Let's say this is some theoretical partner you're dealing with, and you're getting bad feedback, or you just don't like the way that it's delivered, and you have to figure out, okay, how do I respond to this? Take into full context, hey, has this happened before? What is my ultimate goal? And how can I center this person in the decision? Like, is my goal to work better with this person? And if it is, then a real conversation with them about how you work will make a real difference. And sometimes that is a high road, even if it's an awkward conversation. We're seeing that generational friction actually in the workplace today. As young people, Gen Z, into the workforce, sometimes it's really hard for them to have awkward and difficult conversations, which leads to high churn. So this is an area of cultural competency that leaders have to have as we enter a generational turning within many of our organizations.
Sometimes they ghost you.
Yeah, sometimes they'll or just stop working. They'll collect a check, find another job, and wait for you to fire them.
Oh,
all because of one conversation that could be had if both parties took the high road about what may feel awkward, but how best to work together.
Well, I think when we see each other in person on February 19th, we'll carry on this conversation.
Yeah.
But I think that it is so needed. I have to be truthful that I've only gotten through part 1 and part 2. Mm-hmm. And I have 80 of your books in my basement for your book signing.
Excellent.
And I also bought the Audible, because when I walk and do other things and drive, I will listen to the Audible. And I think that I'm really looking forward to getting into part 3.
Yeah.
Sort of like the generational advice and everything. Mm-hmm. So to close this, what impact do you hope your book will have on future business and government leaders?
Well, I have a
5-minute thing, Ash.
yeah. I have a thesis, and if you've got through part 1 and 2, then you'll know this is my thesis. That any process, thought, experience, or emotion that can manifest at an individual level, it may manifest at an organizational level if you have the right conditions. So this means that an organization can perpetuate acts that are hateful and loving. They can experience stages of life like growth and death. They can demonstrate vindictiveness as well as generosity. They can be innovative and stagnant, sick and healthy, uncaring and conscientious, because all of these are they result from the composite personality that emerges as a distinct corporate reputation. And it's really driven by the individuals within that organization. And so my hope is that, first off, that this book gets into the hands of people who are decision makers across the United States, people who, I wish it was in the hands of every executive leader, anyone who's managing people. But more importantly, I hope that from it, they take 2 points. One, that it's really, really important that you hire the right people and you promote the right people within an organization, because that becomes your composite personality. But that personality has a reputation within the community, and that has a direct connection to your bottom line, to how well you perform. I talk about my experience with the Pleasantdale community in Atlanta and how, as an organization, we saved and bolstered our reputation by developing a relationship with and responding to the needs of that community. So taking away those 2 important points in the context of the 4 ethical imperatives, and particularly the one about building an open system, when you are bringing people in and you've created an organization where you are bringing the right people in, and that those right people have centered communities and individuals, we can have meaningful change within our society, one that reduces political friction, one that increases prosperity, and one that almost eliminates inequality, because large and complex organizations are needed. And I learned that through my leadership during COVID. That experience was one that will ever live with me and has forever changed my perspective on how to lead people.
Thank you, Andy, so much. And I can't wait to meet you in person. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and delve into the 4 moral imperatives of your book.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.